dotage. Bernard Shute, who neither knew nor cared what the hounds were doing, was expatiating at great length to an uninterested squireen upon the virtues and perfections of his new mount. "I did all I knew to come and help you at the river," he said, riding up to the splashed but still dripping Sally, "but Stockbroker wouldn't hear of it. I pulled his ugly head round till his nose was in my boot, but he galloped away just the same." "He was quite right," said Miss Sally. "I didn't want you in the least." As Miss Sally's red gold coil of hair was turned towards me during this speech, I could only infer the glance with which it was delivered from the fact that Mr. Shute responded to it with one of those firm gazes of adoration in which the neighbourhood took such an interest and crumbled away into incoherency. A shout from the top of a hill interrupted the amenities of the check. Flurry was out of the wood in half a dozen seconds, blowing shattering blasts upon his horn, and the hounds rushed to him, knowing the "gone away" note that was never blown in vain. The brown mare came out through the trees and the undergrowth like a woodcock down the wind, and jumped across a stream on to a more than questionable bank. The hounds splashed and struggled after him, and as they landed the first ecstatic whimpers broke forth. In a moment it was full cry, discordant, beautiful, and soul stirring, as the pack spread and sped and settled to the line. I saw the absurd dazzle of tears in Philippa's eyes, and found time for the insulting proffer of the clean pocket handkerchief, as we all galloped hard to get away on good terms with the hounds. It was one of those elect moments in fox hunting when the fittest alone have survived. Even the Quaker's sluggish blood was stirred by good company, and possibly by the remembrance of the singing ash plant, and he lumbered up tall stone-faced banks, and down heavy drops, and across wide ditches, in astounding adherence to the line cut out by Flurry. Cruskeen went like a book, a story for girls, very pleasant and safe, but rather slow. Moonlighter was pulling Miss Sally on to the sterns of the hounds, flying his banks, rocketing like a pheasant over 3-foot walls, committing, in fact, all the crimes induced by youth and overfeeding. He would have done very comfortably with another 6 or 7 stone on his back. Why Bernard Shute did not come off at every fence and generally die 1,000 deaths I cannot explain. Occasionally I rather wished he would, as from my secure position in the rear I saw him charging his fences at whatever pace and place seemed good to the thoroughly demoralised stockbroker, and in so doing cannon heavily against Dr. Hickey on landing over a rotten ditch, jump a wall with his spur rowelling Charlie Knox's boot, and cut in at top speed in front of Flurry, who was scientifically cramming his mare up a very awkward scramble. In so far as I could think of anything beyond Philippa and myself and the next fence, I thought there would be trouble for Mr. Shute in consequence of this last feat. It was a half hour long to be remembered, in spite of the Quaker's ponderous and unalterable gallop, in spite of the thump with which he came down off his banks, in spite of the confiding manner in which he hung upon my hand. We were nearing Castle Knox, and the riders began to edge away from the hounds towards a gate that broke the long barrier of the demesne wall. Steaming horses and purple-faced riders clattered and crushed in at the gate. There was a moment of pulling up and listening, in which quivering tails and pumping sides told their own story. Cruskeen's breathing suggested a cross between a grampus and a gramophone. Philippa's hair had come down, and she had a stitch in her side. Moonlighter, fresher than ever, stamped and dragged at his bit. I thought little Miss Sally looked very white. The bewildering clamour of the hounds was all through the wide laurel plantations. At a word from Flurry, Dr. Hickey shoved his horse ahead and turned down a ride, followed by most of the field. "Philippa," I said severely, "you've had enough, and you know it." "Do go up to the house and make them give you something to eat," struck in Miss Sally, twisting Moonlighter round to keep his mind occupied. "And as for you, Miss Sally," I went on, in the manner of Mr. Fairchild, "the sooner you get off that horse and out of those wet things the better." Flurry, who was just in front of us, said nothing, but gave a short and most disagreeable laugh. Philippa accepted my suggestion with the meekness of exhaustion, but under the circumstances it did not surprise me that Miss Sally did not follow her example. Then ensued an hour of woodland hunting at its worst and most bewildering. I galloped after Flurry and Miss Sally up and down long, glittering lanes of laurel, at every other moment burying my face in the Quaker's coarse white mane to avoid the slash of the branches, and receiving down the back of my neck showers of drops stored up from the rain of the day before, playing an endless game of hide and seek with the hounds, and never getting any nearer to them as they turned and doubled through the thickets of evergreens. Even to my limited understanding of the situation, it became clear at length that two foxes were on foot. Most of the hounds were hard at work a quarter of a mile away, but Flurry, with a grim face and a faithful three couple, stuck to the failing line of the hunted fox. There came a moment when Miss Sally and I, who through many vicissitudes had clung to each other, found ourselves at a spot where two rides crossed. Flurry was waiting there, and a little way up one of the rides a couple of hounds were hustling to and fro, with the thwarted whimpers half breaking from them. He held up his hand to stop us, and at that identical moment Bernard Shute, like a bolt from the blue, burst upon our vision. It need scarcely be mentioned that he was going at a full gallop. I have rarely seen him ride at any other pace, and as he bore down upon Flurry and the hounds, ducking and dodging to avoid the branches, he shouted something about a fox having gone away at the other side of the covert. "Hold hard!" roared Flurry. "Don't you see the hounds, you fool?" Mr. Shute, to do him justice, held hard with all the strength of his body, but it was of no avail. The bay horse had got his head down and his tail up. There was a piercing yell from a hound as it was ridden over, and Flurry's brown mare will not soon forget the moment when Stockbroker's shoulder took her on the point of the hip and sent her staggering into the laurel bushes. As she swung round, Flurry's whip went up, and with a swift backhander the cane and the looped thong caught Bernard across his broad shoulders. "Oh, Mr. Shute!" shrieked Miss Sally, as I stared dumbfounded. "Did that branch hurt you?" "All right, nothing to signify," he called out as he bucketed past, tugging at his horse's head. "Thought someone had hit me at first. Come on, we'll catch 'em up this way." He swung perilously into the main ride, and was gone, totally unaware of the position that Miss Sally's quickness had saved. Flurry rode straight up to his cousin, with a pale, dangerous face. "I suppose you think I'm to stand being ridden over and having my hounds killed to please you," he said. "But you're mistaken. You were very smart, and you may think you've saved him his licking, but you needn't think he won't get it. He'll have it in spite of you before he goes to bed this night." A man who loses his temper badly because he is badly in love is inevitably ridiculous, far though he may be from thinking himself so. He is also a highly unpleasant person to argue with, and Miss Sally and I held our peace respectfully. He turned his horse and rode away. Almost instantly the three couple of hounds opened in the underwood near us with a deafening crash, and not 20 yards ahead the hunted fox, dark with wet and mud, slunk across the ride. The hounds were almost on his brush. Moonlight reared and chafed. The din was redoubled, passed away to a little distance, and suddenly became stationary in the middle of the laurels. "Could he have got into the old ice house?" exclaimed Miss Sally, with reviving excitement. She pushed ahead and turned down the narrowest of all the rides that had that day been my portion. At the end of the green tunnel there was a comparatively open space. Flurry's mare was standing in it riderless, and Flurry himself was hammering with a stone at the padlock of a door that seemed to lead into the heart of a laurel clump. The hounds were baying furiously somewhere back of the entrance, among the laurel stems. "He's got in by the old ice drain," said Flurry, addressing himself sulkily to me and ignoring Miss Sally. He had not the least idea of how absurd was his scowling face, draped by the luxuriant hart's tongues that overhung the doorway. The padlock yielded, and the opening door revealed a low, dark passage, into which Flurry disappeared, lugging a couple of hounds with him by the scruff of the neck. The remaining two couple bayed implacably at the mouth of the drain. The croak of a rusty bolt told of a second door at the inner end of the passage. "Look out for the steps, Flurry; they're all broken," called out Miss Sally in tones of honey. There was no answer. Miss Sally looked at me. Her face was serious, but her mischievous eyes made a confederate of me. "He's in an awful rage," she said. I'm afraid there will certainly be a row."